lessened the economic impact tremendously, but they wouldn't have helped the people up at the top. As it is with the present bailout, this is like osmosis. Money is going up to the top again. Now, what does that mean when we talk about the third worldization of the United States? It means that pretty soon there's going to be no money for virtually all of the things that we take for granted right now. National parks, in a couple of years they'll say, well, I'm sorry, there's no money in the budget for national parks. We're going to have to sell them off. That we're not going to have enough money for schools. It's a shame we don't have enough money for Medicare, etc. There's not going to be any effort, I predict, based upon the last 30 or 50 years, to touch this huge expenditure that takes up more than half of the United States budget, and that's the military.
Now, let me mention, you know, I grew up during the Depression, the earlier Depression, not the one now, but I was born in 1927 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and my mother ran a rooming house. That's how she supported the two of us. But one of the great things about growing up then and the Roosevelt administration is that, as a matter of fact, our public schools were supported. I had wonderful public school in grade school and high school. In grade school, after I learned to read, here in the library of the grade school is where I learned Greek and Roman mythology. You know, in high school, I was able to be involved on the debate team and became a state champion debater. So the public education during the last Great Depression did not wreck education.
Well, education, everything that we use, everything that we expect public money to be used for is going to be sacrificed. Unfortunately, you know, the amount of debt that we're in now just makes these kind of budget items impossible. Now, the military budget seems to be sacrosanct. And we have ridiculous things going on, things like Star Wars, you know, that's still going on. They're still doing research, billions a year, and it's never been proved to work, and everybody says it never will work. Nuclear submarines, for God's sake. I mean, we don't have these enemies anymore. All of this money that's being spent on the military is money that's being taken away from, you know, these other things, such as parks, libraries, schools, military, you know,
well, that was
education.
one of the things.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking about Eisenhower. When Eisenhower became our president, here this great general in World War II, when he became our president, what happened? Eisenhower developed our public highways from coast to coast. He had seen what Germany had, you know, in terms of their highway system, and I thought, you know, wasn't that great that he wanted something, not just for the military, but for all of us as citizens?
A lot of this has happened because of globalization. The U.S. economy was hollowed out. For 10 or 15 years now, we've been shipping jobs overseas, hundreds of thousands of jobs going overseas. And what happened, let's say if a company closes its factories, sends 25,000 people, 25,000 jobs over to China, the economy here is hurt badly, all these people, and there's a ripple effect. But the company, the stock price goes up because they're going to make bigger profits. And so therefore, what's happening in the economy, the real economy, as opposed to the paper economy, varies. It's an opposite effect. You know, what's bad for the local economy, the real economy, is good for the paper economy. And what's happened in the past few years is the paper economy has really gone up. Everybody's been speculating on it. Now the reality has struck. We're suddenly in this, you know, you could say it's collapsed almost. And the people who are being hurt because of the paper economy collapsing are getting the bailout. You know, it's absolutely crazy.
Well, I know I was one of the persons surprised during the bailout of the banking industry recently, when people were still getting $1 million and up to $5 million in the banking industry to save the company. Didn't make any sense to me.
Well, it just shows, I think, that the country is controlled by, in general, large corporations. You can't get elected without the help of large corporations. Large corporations were responsible for the globalization that's done a lot of this already. Let me just give you a single example just to illustrate the harm. When I say globalization, what I'm actually talking about. Now, a few years ago, because of globalization, Mexico had to drop its corn tariffs. It had to get rid of them. Well, immediately...
It had to drop what?
Its tariffs on corn.
I see.
So the U.S. corn flooded into Mexico and destroyed the local Mexican corn industry, because American corn is cheaper because it's subsidized by the U.S. government and indirectly, and there's direct subsidies and indirect subsidies by fuel and by science and all the rest of it. And so this, it doesn't mean the Mexicans pay less for corn, it's just the suppliers can buy it cheaper. So the Mexican corn industry was destroyed. All of the people, all of these little Mexican farmers lost their farms, had to go into the slums or into the factories up on the borders. And the little towns that were supported by these farms, they also dried up and blew away. Consequently, you have an enormous number of Mexicans who had to go into the slums, into these maquiladoras or free trade zones where they work for very low wages, and the taxes there don't even go to the Mexican government. There are no taxes really, so there's very little in the way of medical clinics, in the way of water, nothing for schools, etc. And so some of the Mexicans work there in absolute misery, and the rest are trying to get, a lot of them are trying to get across the border or joining the drug trade. At the same time, in these empty valleys, a single big landowner will buy it up and contract with the U.S. food producers and produce vegetables there for the U.S. food supermarkets for a few years. There's no restrictions on mining the aquifer of any kind of pesticide or herbicide control or erosion control. After 5 or 10 years, it becomes a desert, and then the company writes it off as a tax loss.
So what you're saying, if I understand you, is that we here in the United States, that is those who control the corn industry in the United States, you know, have now displaced the corn industry in Mexico.
This is true. Globalization of this sort, I use that merely as an illustration. You can pick any third world country and you'll find the same thing. The same thing was happening in India when I was over there. There's an enormous number of farmers over in India who are actually committing suicide, because they've just absolutely lost their means of livelihood. They borrow money to try to get through the next year and get some crops in again. Prices drop once more. They find themselves in hock to these avaricious money lenders, and in the end, they commit suicide. It's quite a scandal over there.
Oh, no, you were in India just recently, weren't you?
Yeah, I was there in 2007.
I see. Okay, when you were there, and weren't you at a school at that time?
Yes.
And I mean, you've been learning things internationally. I know, I mean, you've been doing that for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. And what is it that you see that we as American citizens need to pay attention to?
Boy, we got a few hours.
There you go. Well, we can get a start.
Well, one of the things I think we talk about. Well, let me just quote one person who said, you know, America should stop bragging about being a great country and start acting like one. Mm. That means we don't attack other countries and we don't torture prisoners. It means we start cooperating and take the lead on problems of an international basis. International leadership on things like the tremendous pollution that's taking place in the ocean now by disintegrating plastic. I don't even want to get into that at the moment.
Well, no,
it's such a huge topic. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, you brought this to my attention at lunch, and I think it's something that most of us in America have no concept.
There are several giant masses of plastic out in the oceans right now, where it's called the Pacific and Atlantic gyres, north and south. And these are places where the currents bring plastics in that have, let's say, come down the rivers from Asia and North America, and they don't go out. You've got masses there just under the water or floating on the water that are the size of Texas. Plastic